The moment Emilia Conti walked into his restaurant, Don Enrico Moreau knew three things with absolute certainty. She didn't belong in his world, she would destroy something inside him he'd spent decades protecting, and he would let her. She wore grief like a second skin, her dark eyes scanning the room not with fear but with purpose, searching for a ghost only she could see. When their gazes locked across the crowded dining room, time fractured. He saw recognition flicker across her face, then something darker. Not hatred. Worse. Expectation. As if she'd been waiting her entire life for this exact moment, and now that it had arrived, neither of them would ever be the same. Thank you for joining this story. Please like, share and subscribe and comment where you are watching from. Emilia's hands didn't shake as she approached his table, though they should have. Every instinct screamed that she was walking toward a cliff edge, but she'd stopped listening to self-preservation the day she'd found her father's journal hidden beneath the floorboards of his studio, wrapped in canvas and sealed with wax like something sacred or damning. Don Enrico didn't stand. He simply watched her with the stillness of a predator who'd already decided not to strike. His tailored suit was midnight black, custom-fitted to shoulders that still carried power despite his age. Silver hair swept back from a face that time had carved into something between beautiful and dangerous. Tattoos crept up from his collar, remnants of a younger, wilder version of himself that no amount of respectability could completely erase. The restaurant around them hummed with quiet conversation, the clink of expensive crystal, the subtle music of wealth and power dining in their natural habitat. But in the space between Emilia and the man at table 7, the world had narrowed to just their eyes meeting across an impossible distance. "You're sitting in my father's favorite table," Emilia said, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. "I know." His accent was pure Italian silk wrapped around steel, each word precisely placed. "I've been sitting here every Thursday evening for 23 years. Who was your father?" "Marco Conti." Something shifted behind his dark eyes. Not surprise. Recognition. Memory. A muscle ticked in his jaw, the only sign that her father's name meant anything at all. He gestured to the chair across from him with one tattooed hand, rings catching the candlelight. Heavy gold, understated but unmistakably expensive. "Sit." It wasn't a request. It was the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed without question. Emilia should have walked away. Should have turned around and left before whatever this was could take root. Instead she sat. Later that night, lying awake in her father's old apartment, Emilia couldn't explain why she'd accepted. Why she'd sat across from the man who'd haunted her father's final writings, sharing wine that probably cost more than her monthly rent while he asked questions with surgical precision. What did she do? Art restoration at the Museum of Fine Arts, specializing in Renaissance paintings. Where did she live? The North End, in her father's old apartment overlooking the harbor where ships came and went like memories. Was she alone? The pause before she answered yes had made his jaw tighten almost imperceptibly, his fingers going still on the stem of his wine glass. He'd told her nothing about himself. He didn't need to. Everyone in Boston knew Don Enrico Moreau, the legitimate businessman who owned half the city's finest restaurants, the philanthropist who funded children's hospitals and art programs for underprivileged youth, the man rumors whispered controlled everything the law couldn't touch. The king who wore a crown no one could see but everyone felt pressing down on their shoulders when he entered a room. "Your father was a good man," Enrico had finally said, his voice dropping to something almost gentle. "He deserved better than what this city gave him." "He deserved to be remembered," Emilia had replied, watching him carefully for any crack in his control. "Not erased like he never existed. Not buried in an unmarked grave that doesn't even bear his real name." The word hung between them like a blade balanced on its edge. Enrico's expression hadn't changed, but his fingers had tightened around his wine glass until his knuckles went white, until she thought the crystal might shatter in his grip. "Memory is a dangerous thing, Miss Conti. Sometimes forgetting is mercy. And sometimes," she'd said softly, meeting his eyes without flinching, "it's the cruelest violence of all. Sometimes the only thing worse than being hurt is being forgotten like the hurt never mattered." He'd stared at her for a long moment, something unreadable moving behind his eyes. Then he'd signaled for the check, paid in cash that he pulled from a money clip thick with $100 bills, and stood. "Carlo will drive you home," he'd said. Not asked. Stated. "I can take the subway." "You could." He'd helped her into her coat with surprising gentleness, his hands lingering on her shoulders for just a moment. But you won't. Not tonight. Not from my restaurant. She hadn't argued. Something in his tone made it clear that this wasn't about control. Not yet. This was about something older. Something that looked like guilt wearing the mask of protection. She hadn't expected him to call. But 3 days later an invitation arrived, handwritten on heavy cardstock that felt expensive beneath her fingers, delivered by a man in an expensive suit who waited at her door with infinite patience for her response like she had any choice but to accept. The gallery opening was invitation only, filled with Boston's elite sipping champagne that cost more per bottle than most people made in a week. Women in designer gowns and men in custom suits, all of them moving through the space like they owned it. Maybe they did. In this world, ownership was measured in influence rather than deeds. Emilia felt underdressed in her simple black dress despite having spent more than she should have at a boutique she normally only window shopped. Until Enrico appeared at her elbow, his presence parting the crowd like Moses with the Red Sea. Conversations paused. Heads turned. The power dynamic in the room shifted visibly, everyone recalibrating around his presence. "You came," he said, and something in his voice suggested he'd genuinely been uncertain. Vulnerable even. "You sent a compelling invitation. I sent 7 drafts before settling on that one." The admission was so unexpected, so human, that Emilia forgot to guard her expression. Enrico's lips curved slightly, the smallest hint of a smile. "You're surprised I second-guess myself. I'm surprised you're admitting it. I find myself wanting to surprise you often, Emilia." Her name and his accent did something dangerous to her pulse, made her hyper-aware of how close he was standing. "May I show you something?" He led her through the gallery, his hand hovering at the small of her back without quite touching. A gesture of possession that everyone in the room understood without him needing to make contact. They passed sculptures and installations, abstract pieces that probably had deep meaning Emilia was too distracted to decipher. Then he stopped at a small painting tucked in a corner away from the main exhibition. A street scene of old Boston, rendered in oils with a melancholic beauty that made her chest ache. Rain-slicked cobblestones reflecting gaslight. A woman with an umbrella hurrying past a flower vendor. The kind of everyday beauty that most people overlooked but that her father had always seen. The signature in the corner stopped her breath. "Auntie. My father painted this," Emilia breathed, stepping closer. Her reflection ghosted in the protective glass. "I thought all his work was lost when he died. The gallery said they'd sold everything, that there were no records of where the pieces went. I've been collecting it for years." Quietly. Enrico stood close enough that she could feel his warmth, smell his cologne. Something dark and expensive with notes of bergamot and cedar. He captured something true about this city. The soul beneath the concrete. Most people paint what they want to see. Marco painted what was actually there. The beauty and the broken pieces existing side by side, neither one erasing the other. His voice carried reverence when he spoke about her father's work. Real appreciation, not the pretension that filled most of these gallery spaces. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone you collected his work?" "Because some things are too precious to share." His dark eyes met hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "And some debts can never be repaid, only honored in silence." The weight of unspoken history pressed between them, heavy as the humid Boston air before a storm. "What debt did you owe my father?" "One I'm still paying." He didn't elaborate, and something in his expression told her not to push. Not yet. Not here, where too many ears might hear things they shouldn't. Around them, the gallery hummed with conversation, but in their corner they might as well have been alone. The first gift arrived on Monday. A leather journal, expensive and empty, the kind with hand-stitched binding and paper thick enough to paint on. Wrapped in brown paper tied with string, with a note in that same careful handwriting, for new memories to replace the ones stolen. The second came Wednesday, her father's painting from the gallery, professionally framed and delivered to her apartment by the same silent man in the expensive suit. Carlo, she'd learned. Enrico's driver, bodyguard, and apparently errand runner. "Don Enrico wanted you to have it," Carlo had said in his quiet, accented English. "He said it belongs with family." Thursday brought flowers, not roses but lilies. The kind her father used to bring home on her birthday. White lilies that meant remembrance. By Friday, Emilia knew she needed to establish boundaries before she drowned in whatever this was becoming. Before the undertow pulled her so deep she'd never find her way back to the surface. She called the number on his card, her hands trembling slightly as she pressed dial. Emilia. He answered on the first ring, her name a statement of fact rather than a question. Like he'd been waiting for her call. Like he'd known she would break first. You need to stop sending me things. Why? Genuine curiosity, not defensiveness. He sounded honestly puzzled, like the idea of stopping hadn't occurred to him. Because I don't know what you want from me. Silence stretched between them, filled only by her breathing and the distant sounds of his restaurant in the background. The clink of dishes being washed, someone calling orders in Italian. Normal sounds from an abnormal man. Then, I want to take you to dinner. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can talk about things that matter. Things we can't say in crowded galleries or restaurants where everyone is watching. Things like why my father's journal mentions your name 47 times in the last year of his life? Yes. No hesitation. No deflection. Just brutal honesty. Things exactly like that. He chose a small Italian restaurant in the North End, family-owned for 3 generations, the kind of place tourists never found because it didn't have a website or a sign in English. Just a small brass plaque by the door and word of mouth that kept the tables full with locals who'd been coming for decades. The grandmother who ran it kissed both Enrico's cheeks and called him nipote, grandson. She was tiny and fierce, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that probably missed nothing. She seated them at a private table in the back, brought wine without being asked, and disappeared with a knowing smile that suggested she'd been waiting years for this moment. She thinks you're finally bringing home a nice girl, Emilia observed, accepting the wine he poured with steady hands. His hands never shook, she noticed. Steady as a surgeon's. She's not wrong. Enrico settled across from her, his dark eyes never leaving her face. Though I suspect you're far more dangerous than nice. You don't know anything about me. I know your father was an artist who refused to compromise his vision, even when it cost him everything. I know you restored a Caravaggio last year that 3 other experts had declared impossible to save, and that your technique was featured in the Journal of Art Conservation. I know you live alone but keep your father's reading glasses on the kitchen table like he might walk in and need them. His eyes held hers with uncomfortable accuracy. I know you take your coffee black with 1 sugar, you sketch on napkins when you're anxious and you're afraid of me but not for the reasons you should be. Emilia's throat tightened. You've been watching me. Protecting you. He said it like there was no difference, like the 2 words were synonyms in his vocabulary. The moment you walked into my restaurant you became something precious. And precious things in my world need to be guarded. From what? From people who would use you to hurt me. From the consequences of your father's choices. From the weight of knowing too much about things that should stay buried. He leaned forward slightly. From me if necessary. The honesty stole her breath. Around them, the restaurant hummed with quiet conversation in Italian. Families gathered around tables covered in red checkered cloths. Normal life happening around them while they sat in their bubble of tension and unspoken truths. What should I be afraid of? She asked softly. That I won't be able to let you go. Simple. Devastating. True. That every day you spend with me makes you more mine, and I'm selfish enough to want that even though I know better. Even though I know what happened to your father is exactly what will happen to you if you stay too close to me. My father's journal, she said, deciding to trust him with the truth. Or at least part of it. It's not a diary. It's a record. Names, dates, places. Things he witnessed. Things he couldn't forget even though someone wanted him to. Enrico's expression didn't change, but something went very still behind his eyes. The stillness of a predator that had just scented danger. And my name appears 47 times. 47 times he wrote about choices you made. People who disappeared. Businesses that burned. Families that left Boston in the middle of the night with no forwarding address. She watched him carefully, trying to read what was happening behind that controlled mask. He documented everything you wanted the world to forget. Everything you needed buried to become the man sitting across from me now. Why are you telling me this? Because I need to know if you're going to have me killed for knowing it exists. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly around her wine glass. Enrico reached across the table, his fingers covering hers with surprising gentleness. His hands were warm, solid. Boo. I would burn that journal and every copy of it without hesitation to Zorro. I would erase every word your father wrote about me to protect my empire. But I would never hurt you to do it. Never. Why not? Because your father made me promise. His thumb traced circles on her wrist, his touch sending electricity up her arm that had nothing to do with fear. The last time I saw Marco, he made me swear that if anything happened to him, I would protect you. Keep you safe from the world we'd both been part of. I gave him my word. And I keep my promises, Emilia. It's one of the few decent things about me. When was the last time you saw him? 3 days before he died. Pain flickered across his face, genuine and raw. He came to my office at 2 in the morning. Told me he was sick, that the doctors had given him 3 months at most. Asked me to honor the sacrifice he'd made by ensuring you never had to make the same choice. That you could live your life free from the shadows that had consumed his. Emilia felt tears burning but refused to let them fall. Not here. Not yet. What choice did he make? To testify or to disappear? To die quickly or to live in exile? Enrico's voice was flat, factual. He witnessed something he shouldn't have. A betrayal. A death. Justice by my standards, murder by the laws. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, painting a street scene at 3 in the morning because he couldn't sleep. And he saw what I did to a man who'd tried to take what was mine. The food arrived, interrupting the moment. The grandmother herself brought the plates. Pasta made fresh that afternoon, sauce that had been simmering since morning. Food made with the kind of love that couldn't be replicated in any fancy restaurant. They ate in silence for a while, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Emilia found herself studying him, the way he moved with precise economy, never wasting a gesture. How his eyes constantly scanned the room even while focused on her, always assessing, always aware. The tattoos that disappeared beneath his collar like secrets written on his skin that only certain people were allowed to read. What do the tattoos mean? She finally asked. Enrico set down his fork, his expression becoming unreadable. Carefully neutral in a way that told her this mattered. Names. Whose names? People I couldn't save. People I had to erase to survive. He met her eyes and the pain there was ancient. 41 names total. Your father's isn't there because he lived. But I see his name every time I look in the mirror anyway. I see all the names, Emilia. The ones on my skin and the ones that should be there but aren't. The confession settled over them like ash. That's why you collect his paintings. It's the only memory of him I'm allowed to keep. The only way to prove he existed when I spent so many years ensuring certain other people didn't. His hands clenched on the table, knuckles white. Your father was an artist, Emilia. He saw beauty in everything, even in me. Even after he knew what I was. And I made him give up his entire life. His career, his connections, his future in the art world that was finally recognizing his talent. To protect you from the consequences of witnessing my war. What did he witness exactly? A man dying. Enrico's voice was quiet. Begging. Promising me anything if I let him live. And me putting 2 bullets in his head anyway because mercy would have been seen as weakness, and weakness in my world is a death sentence. The brutal honesty should have made her afraid. Should have sent her running. Instead, Emilia found herself leaning forward. And my father saw this. Every second of it. He was in an alley across the street, hidden in the shadows with his easel, painting the way the streetlights reflected off wet pavement. A ghost of a smile crossed Enrico's face. He told me later that he'd been trying to capture the exact shade of gold the lights made on the puddles. Instead, he captured me becoming a monster. What did you do? I gave him a choice. Testify and watch you grow up from a coffin or disappear and watch you from a distance. Enrico's eyes were dark with old pain. He chose you without hesitation. Walked away from everything he'd built, every connection he'd made. Let the world think he'd given up on art entirely. Took a job as a night janitor at a hospital so he could keep irregular hours, stay off any radar, make sure no one ever connected him to me. But you stayed in touch. I made sure he was safe. Sent money through channels he couldn't trace back to me. Bought his paintings through intermediaries so he'd have something beyond the janitor salary. Watched from a distance as he raised you alone after your mother left. Emilia processed this, her mind working through implications and connections. The money for my college tuition. The anonymous scholarship. Your father's pride wouldn't let him take direct help. but he couldn't argue with a scholarship committee's decision. Enrico's smile was sad. He wanted you to have everything he couldn't give you. Education. Opportunities. A life free from the choices that had trapped him. Days later, Emilia found herself in his world more often than her own. Gallery openings where his hand settled possessively at the small of her back, announcing to everyone who saw them that she was under his protection. Late dinners where conversations stretched past midnight, circling topics that mattered. Art, memory, legacy, the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. Quiet moments in his restaurant after closing when he'd watch her sketch on napkins with an intensity that made her fingers tremble. He never interrupted. Just watched like she was creating something sacred rather than absent doodles. He never pushed for more than she offered, but his restraint felt like its own form of seduction. The way he'd stand when she entered a room, like she was royalty worthy of deference. How he'd ensure she was served first at every meal, his attention divided between her and the constant assessment of threats she couldn't see. The careful distance he maintained when they were alone, as if he didn't trust himself to touch her beyond what was absolutely necessary. "You're staring again," she said one evening, catching him watching her across his office while she examined a painting he was considering purchasing. A modern piece, all sharp lines and aggressive color. "I'm memorizing." He didn't look away, didn't pretend otherwise. "The way you tuck your hair behind your left ear when you're thinking. How you bite your lower lip when you're trying not to smile. The exact shade of gold in your eyes when candlelight hits them just right." "Why?" "Because someday you'll realize what I am and you'll leave." His voice was matter-of-fact, but something raw flickered beneath it. Something that looked like fear from a man who probably hadn't been afraid in decades. "And I want to remember exactly what it felt like to have you look at me like I'm something more than the monster everyone knows I am." Emilia set down the painting, crossing to where he sat behind his desk. The office was all dark wood and leather, the kind of masculine space that screamed power and money. "What if I already know what you are? Then you're braver than you should be." His eyes tracked her movement like a predator watching prey, but he made no move toward her. "Or more foolish. Maybe I'm neither. Maybe I'm just tired of pretending I don't feel this." She stopped just out of reach, watching his hands clench on the armrests of his chair. "You're not the only one memorizing, Enrico." The muscle in his jaw ticked. "Emilia. The way you touch your ring when you're thinking about the past. How your accent gets stronger when you're emotional. The fact that you keep fresh flowers in your office every week even though you claim not to care about such things." She stepped closer, close enough to see his pupils dilate. "I see you too. All of you. The parts you show the world and the parts you try to hide." His control was a physical thing she could watch fracturing, could see in the tension of his shoulders and the way his breathing had changed. "If I touch you, then touch me." The kiss happened with the inevitability of gravity. His hands cupped her face with a gentleness that contradicted everything he was, thumbs brushing her cheekbones as if she were made of something infinitely precious and breakable. When their lips met, it felt like recognition, like every moment before this had been leading to this exact point in time. He kissed her like he was trying to memorize her from the inside out. Slow and thorough and absolutely devastating. His restraint was palpable, the leashed power in his body evident in every careful touch. She could feel him holding back, feel the tension in every muscle as he fought whatever instinct wanted him to take more than she was offering. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "This is a mistake," he said, his voice rough. "I know. I'll want more. I want everything. Your mornings and your midnights, your laughter and your tears, every thought in your head and every beat of your heart. I know that too." His eyes opened, dark and intense and full of something that looked dangerously like love. "And you're choosing this anyway?" "I'm choosing you anyway." She pressed her lips to his again, softer this time. "There's a difference between forgiving someone and choosing them despite their flaws. I'm not forgiving you for what you did to my father. But I'm choosing you anyway." The distinction mattered to him. She could see it in the way his entire body seemed to exhale, like he'd been holding his breath waiting for judgment. "I don't deserve you," he whispered against her lips. "Probably not." She smiled against his mouth. "But you're stuck with me now." The next 3 weeks existed in a haze of stolen moments and building intimacy. Enrico courted her with the focus he applied to everything, relentlessly, thoroughly, and with a patience that both thrilled and frustrated her. Flowers appeared at her studio every Monday. Books she'd mentioned wanting materialized on her doorstep. A colleague who'd been giving her trouble at work suddenly transferred to another department, and when she'd confronted Enrico about it, he'd simply shrugged. "Did you have something to do with Dr. Morrison's sudden departure?" she asked over dinner one evening. "He made you cry." Enrico cut his steak with precise movements, like he was performing surgery rather than eating. "I ensured he understood that was unacceptable. You can't just rearrange my life because someone upset me." "I can." He met her eyes calmly without apology. "And I will. You're mine to protect now, Amelia. That includes protecting you from men who abuse their power over junior staff." Morrison had a history of inappropriate behavior that HR had been ignoring because of his tenure. "I simply made sure the right people saw the evidence." The possessive certainty in his voice should have alarmed her. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in her belly. "I'm not a possession. No. You're infinitely more valuable." His hand found hers across the table, his thumb stroking her knuckles. "A possession can be replaced. You cannot. You're singular. Irreplaceable. The only good thing I've touched in 57 years that hasn't turned to ash in my hands." But beneath the romance, Amelia felt him watching. Calculating. Building walls around her that she hadn't asked for and didn't want. When she mentioned getting drinks with her colleague Thomas after work, Enrico's expression had shuttered completely. "Thomas Rivera from the museum?" His voice was too careful, too controlled. The kind of control that meant emotions were being actively suppressed. "He's a friend, Enrico. We're collaborating on a restoration project. A 15th century altarpiece that needs 2 sets of hands. He's a man who looks at you like you're the only art worth studying." Enrico set down his wine glass with precision, the crystal clicking against the table. "And he doesn't have the restraint to keep those thoughts to himself when you're not looking." The jealousy should have been a red flag. Instead, it sent a thrill through her that she wasn't entirely proud of. "And how do you look at me? Like I'd burn the world down before I let anyone take you from me." His honesty was brutal and beautiful. "Like you're the only good thing I've touched in 57 years that hasn't turned to ash in my hands. Like if I lost you, there'd be nothing left worth being human for." "Does that frighten you?" "Yes," she admitted, her heart pounding against her ribs. "But not enough to run." "Not yet." His hand tightened on hers, almost painful in its intensity. "It should be. Because I meant every word." The first real fracture began so small she almost missed it. A business dinner where Enrico's hand on her thigh under the table felt more possessive than protective, his grip tightening whenever another man looked her direction. The way his jaw would clench when the waiter smiled at her too warmly, too long. How he'd started having Carlo drive her everywhere. To work, to the grocery store, even just a few blocks to her favorite coffee shop. "I can take the subway," Amelia protested after the 4th consecutive day of finding Carlo waiting outside her building at 7 in the morning. "You can." Enrico looked up from his paperwork, his expression neutral in a way that made her nervous. "But you won't. That's not your decision to make." Something dark flickered across his face, there and gone so quickly she almost missed it. "Isn't it? I've made you a target, Amelia. Every moment you're unprotected is a moment someone could use you against me. Someone could hurt you to hurt me. I won't apologize for keeping you safe. Even if it means keeping me caged? If that's what it takes." No hesitation. No apology. Just flat certainty that what he was doing was right regardless of how she felt about it. Amelia felt something cold settle in her chest. "You're doing it again. Deciding what I need without asking what I want. What you want isn't always what's best for you." He said it like explaining a simple fact to a child who didn't understand the dangers of the world. The paternalistic dismissal made her blood boil. "You sound exactly like the men my father spent his life trying to escape. The ones who thought power gave them the right to control everyone around them." Enrico's face went carefully blank, but his eyes looked like she'd struck him. "I am those men, Tesoro. I've been trying to tell you that since the moment we met. I'm not a good man playing at being bad. I'm exactly what everyone whispers I am, just with better tailoring and a prettier mask. The sooner you accept that, the safer you'll be." The argument escalated over the next week. Small disagreements becoming bigger fights, both of them too stubborn to bend, too proud to apologize first. Amelia felt herself pulling away, protecting her heart before he could smother it completely under the weight of his protection. She started staying late at the studio, using work as an excuse to avoid the suffocating intensity of his attention. Stopped answering his calls as quickly, letting them go to voicemail before calling back hours later with apologies about being busy. Created distance where there had been none because she needed to breathe, needed to think without the gravitational pull of his presence warping her judgment. She could feel him watching even from a distance. Carlos' car following her at a discreet distance. The new security cameras that had appeared in her building's lobby. The way waiters at restaurants they'd never been to together knew her name and what she liked to drink. Then Thomas asked her to dinner. Just as friends, he said, his kind eyes crinkling with his smile. You look like you could use a break from all the intensity. A normal evening with normal conversation about normal things. Thomas was safe. Normal. A literature professor who spent his weekends hiking in the White Mountains and his evenings reading Renaissance poetry in the original Italian. Everything Enrico wasn't. Everything her life could be if she stepped away from the edge she'd been dancing on for weeks. Emilia said yes. She didn't tell Enrico. Told herself it wasn't his business who she had dinner with, that she wasn't his property to monitor and control. But when Thomas picked her up at her apartment in his sensible Honda Civic with the National Public Radio sticker on the bumper, she felt the weight of invisible eyes watching from the shadows. Carlos' car was parked across the street. She pretended not to notice. Dinner was pleasant. Easy. Thomas talked about his upcoming sabbatical to study Renaissance poetry in Florence, asked about her restoration work with genuine interest and no ulterior motives. Made her laugh without the constant undercurrent of danger she'd grown accustomed to with Enrico. No calculating gazes tracking every person who looked her direction. No subtle shifts in body language that meant he was assessing threats she couldn't see. No tension coiled beneath every word like a snake ready to strike. Just normal conversation over normal pasta at a normal restaurant where nobody knew her name and the waiter didn't treat her like royalty. You seem different, Thomas observed over dessert, his expression concerned in the way of someone who actually cared about her well-being. More guarded than you used to be. Like you're always looking over your shoulder. Life got complicated. The silver-haired man who watches you like a hawk? Thomas stirred his coffee, not quite meeting her eyes. Everyone at the museum has noticed, Emilia. The expensive cars. The security detail that follows you. The way he looks at you like he owns you. Like you're his most prized possession. Emilia's heart stuttered. It's not like that. Isn't it? Thomas reached across the table, his hand covering hers with gentle concern. Normal, uncomplicated concern. You can tell me if you need help. If you're in over your head. I know people, resources, places you could go if you needed to disappear. The offer was kind, well-meaning. Completely insufficient for the reality of her situation. I'm fine. She pulled her hand back gently, guilt churning in her stomach. But thank you for caring. When Thomas walked her to her door, his goodnight hug was warm and brief and uncomplicated. Friendly. Safe. Everything Enrico would never be. The door across the hall opened before she could get her key in the lock. Enrico stood there, still in his suit from dinner service, his dark eyes absolutely arctic as they took in Thomas's hand still resting on Emilia's shoulder. The temperature in the hallway seemed to drop 10 degrees. Thank you for seeing her home, Enrico said, his voice perfectly polite and completely terrifying in its restraint. Thomas paled slightly, his hand dropping from Emilia's shoulder like he'd been burned. Of course. Good night, Emilia. He left quickly, practically fleeing down the stairs rather than waiting for the elevator. Smart man. Emilia turned to Enrico, anger and something more complicated warring in her chest. What are you doing here? I own the building. Simple. Devastating. Delivered like he was commenting on the weather. I've owned it for 3 weeks. The revelation hit like a physical blow, stealing her breath and making the hallway spin slightly. You bought my building? I bought your safety. He stepped into the hallway, pulling her door closed behind them so they were alone in the dim corridor. I bought the ability to ensure no one enters this building who means you harm. I bought peace of mind. You bought control. Her voice shook with fury and something else she didn't want to name. You bought the ability to monitor my every move. Yes. No apology. No shame. Just brutal honesty. And I'd do it again without hesitation. Do you know what I did tonight while you were having your pleasant dinner with Professor Rivera? His control was fracturing, the careful mask slipping to reveal something raw and dangerous beneath. I eliminated a threat. 3 men who wanted to use you to destroy me. 3 men who had photographs of you, leaving work, getting coffee, walking through the park. Plans for taking you, for hurting you in ways that would have broken something inside me I'd never get back. He stepped closer and she could smell gunpowder beneath his cologne. Fresh. Recent. 3 more names I'll carry. 3 more ghosts I'll see every time I close my eyes. And you were out there, unprotected, with a man who couldn't keep you safe if his life depended on it, making me insane with the knowledge that I couldn't be in both places at once. Emilia's anger drained away, replaced by cold realization. You killed them. I protected you. He said it like there was no difference, like the 2 concepts were identical in his mind. I did what needed to be done so you could have your normal dinner with your normal friend and pretend for a few hours that you're not in love with a monster. The accusation hung between them. She wanted to deny it, but the words stuck in her throat. Maybe I don't want to need protection. The words burst out of her, desperate and raw. Maybe I don't want to live in a world where people die because they looked at me wrong. Too bad. His voice was flat, final. You're in my world now, Emilia. That target on your back doesn't disappear just because you're tired of the weight. The only choice you have is whether you want my protection or not. Whether you want me or not. But the danger. He laughed, bitter and broken. That's permanent. That's the price of knowing me, of being seen with me, of mattering to me. Then maybe I should leave your world entirely. The words hung between them like a grenade with the pin pulled. The hallway was silent except for their breathing, harsh and uneven in the confined space. Enrico's expression went absolutely still, all emotion draining from his face until he looked like a statue carved from ice. Beautiful and untouchable and completely lifeless. You want to leave. It wasn't a question. Emilia felt tears burning but refused to let them fall, refused to show weakness when she needed to be strong. I want to breathe without wondering if you're watching. I want to make my own choices without your approval. I want to live without blood on my hands, even if it's your hands doing the killing in my name. You want someone safe. Someone normal. Someone like Thomas who reads poetry and doesn't have nightmares about the people he's erased. His voice was hollow, scraped clean of emotion. Someone who isn't drowning in ghosts and guilt and blood that never quite washes clean no matter how hard you scrub. Enrico. No. He stepped back, physically and emotionally retreating behind walls she could see him rebuilding in real time. Brick by brick shutting her out. You're right. I've been selfish, keeping you in a world that will only destroy you. Just like it destroyed your father. Just like it destroys everything beautiful I'm stupid enough to touch. That's not what I meant. Go inside, Emilia. His voice was gentle now, and somehow that was worse than his anger, worse than his jealousy. Gentleness from him felt like goodbye. Lock your door. In the morning, Carlo will ensure you're safe while I make arrangements to untangle your life from mine. Arrangements for what? His smile was the saddest thing she'd ever seen, full of resignation and old pain and something that looked like love dying in real time. To let you go. Properly this time. Completely. The way I should have the moment you walked into my restaurant looking for ghosts. The way your father would have wanted me to. He was across the hall and through his door before she could respond, the lock clicking with a finality that echoed in her chest like a gunshot. Emilia stood in the empty hallway, her heart fracturing into pieces she wasn't sure could ever be put back together, wondering how something that felt so inevitable had shattered so completely. And whether she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Or narrowly escaped the most beautiful prison she'd never be able to leave. The silence pressed down on her like a weight. Inside her apartment her phone buzzed. A text from Thomas. Got home safe. Thanks for tonight. You deserve better than whatever you're caught up in. She deleted it without responding. Because the truth was she didn't want better. She didn't want safe or normal or uncomplicated. She wanted the man across the hall who carried 41 names on his skin and her father's memory in his soul. She wanted the monster who killed to protect her and collected her father's paintings like prayers. He wanted Enrico. But wanting him and being able to survive him were 2 very different things. And she wasn't sure which truth mattered more. The romance has fractured. But the real danger is only beginning. Sometimes love means letting go. Sometimes it means holding on through fire. And sometimes the choice isn't yours to make. The first morning without Enrico felt like waking up in a world where all the color had drained away. Emilia went through the motions: coffee that tasted like ash, a shower that didn't wash away the emptiness, getting dressed for work in clothes that suddenly felt like costumes for a life that no longer fit. Everything felt muted. Wrong. Like she'd amputated part of herself and was only now realizing how much she needed it to function. Carlo wasn't waiting outside her building. The absence felt louder than his presence ever had. The street looked the same. Same coffee shop on the corner, same dog walker passing by, same rhythm of morning traffic. But without Carlo's silent presence, without the weight of Enrico's protection, the world felt dangerous in a way it never had before. At the museum, her colleagues noticed immediately. "You look terrible," her friend Sarah said bluntly over lunch, setting down her fork to study Emilia with concern. "What happened? And don't say nothing because you have shadows under your eyes that makeup can't hide." "I ended something that never should have started." "The silver fox?" Sarah's eyebrows rose. "Emilia, half the women in Boston would kill for a man who looks at them the way he looked at you. Like you were the only person in the room worth seeing." "He was suffocating me." The word sounded hollow even to her own ears. "He was protecting you. There's a difference." Sarah stirred her salad thoughtfully, choosing her words with care. "My grandmother used to say that some men love like the ocean. Vast and overwhelming and sometimes dangerous. But that doesn't make it less real. Just harder to navigate. The question isn't whether it's overwhelming. It's whether you're willing to learn to swim." Emilia thought about that as she returned to her restoration work. The Caravaggio she'd been restoring for months stared back at her. A saint in the moment of martyrdom, pain and transcendence written across his face in masterful brushstrokes. Blood and light in equal measure. Her father had taught her that the best art captured contradictions. Light and shadow existing simultaneously. Beauty and violence occupying the same space. Love and destruction intertwined so completely you couldn't separate them. She was beginning to understand what he meant. She was beginning to understand that walking away from Enrico hadn't freed her. It had just made her incomplete. 3 days passed in a fog of regret and second-guessing. Then 4. Then 5. Emilia told herself she was relieved by the silence. No flowers arriving at her studio. No gifts appearing on her doorstep. No Carlo shadowing her movements with his quiet, unobtrusive presence. Enrico had kept his word. He was letting her go completely. So why did it feel like dying by inches? Why did she catch herself reaching for her phone to text him about small things? A funny observation, a beautiful painting, a memory that surfaced. Why did her apartment feel cavernous and empty when it was the same size it had always been? Why did food taste bland and colors seem washed out? On the 5th day, she found herself standing outside his restaurant at closing time, watching through the windows like a ghost haunting her own lost life. Inside, she could see him moving through the dining room with that familiar grace, checking that everything was perfect for tomorrow. The same ritual she'd watched him perform dozens of times when she'd belonged in his world. He looked tired. Older. The silver in his hair seemed more prominent, the lines around his eyes deeper. Like the weight he usually carried with such controlled ease had finally become too much for even his shoulders to bear. She almost went in. Her hand was on the door handle, her heart pounding, courage gathering like a storm. But then he paused in his movements, his head turning toward the window as if he could feel her presence through the glass. Their eyes met, his dark and unreadable behind carefully constructed walls, hers surely revealing too much. Everything she felt, everything she regretted, everything she wanted to take back. For a moment neither moved. The world narrowed to just that connection, that recognition, that terrible distance between them. Then Enrico turned away deliberately, disappearing into the back of the restaurant. The dismissal was clear. Final. The door she'd closed between them locked from both sides now. Emilia walked home alone through streets that felt colder than the October weather warranted, tears freezing on her cheeks before she could wipe them away. The danger came on a Tuesday, exactly 1 week after she'd walked away from him. Emilia was working late at the museum, alone in the restoration lab on the 3rd floor. The security guard had checked on her an hour ago, making his rounds with his usual friendly wave. The building was silent except for the hum of climate control and her own breathing, the occasional creak of old architecture settling for the night. She was so focused on the delicate work of cleaning centuries of grime from a Renaissance Madonna that she didn't hear them enter. Didn't hear the security guard being quietly subdued. Didn't hear the footsteps approaching down the marble hallway. Emilia Conti. The voice came from behind her, accented. Italian but not the same cadence as Enrico's. Rougher. Dangerous in a way that made her blood freeze. Don't turn around. Don't scream. Don't do anything stupid. Just listen very carefully. Her hand stilled on the painting, the delicate brush trembling. What do you want? To deliver a message to Don Moreau. A second voice, rougher with the flat vowels of South Boston. And you're going to help us do that. You're going to be the message. I don't have anything to do with him anymore. Her voice was steady even as her mind raced through options. The panic button under her desk was too far away. Her phone was in her bag across the room. No one else was on this floor. Laughter, cruel and disbelieving. You think ending it matters? You think he stops caring just because you walked away? You've been watching, sweetheart. He still has men following you. Still checks on you every day. Still looks at your building every night before he goes home like a lovesick puppy. The first voice moved closer. You're the only thing that made the old bastard human in 30 years. Which makes you the perfect leverage. Hands grabbed her arms before she could run, yanking her backward. She tried to scream, but something pressed against her mouth. Cloth, chemical-smelling, sickeningly sweet. The world tilted sideways. Her last conscious thought was that Enrico had been right about everything. The danger didn't disappear just because she was tired of it. The target didn't vanish just because she'd walked away from the man who'd painted it on her back. Then darkness swallowed her whole. Emilia woke to darkness and the smell of salt water mixed with rust and old fish. Her head pounded like someone had taken a hammer to her skull, and her wrists ached where they were bound behind her with what felt like zip ties cutting into her skin. She was sitting on a cold concrete floor, her back against something metal and unyielding. Panic clawed at her throat. She forced it down, forced herself to think like Enrico would. Assess the situation. Gather information. Don't let them see your fear. She's awake. That first voice again, closer now. Watching her in the darkness. Light flooded the space suddenly, blinding after the darkness. Emilia squinted against it, her eyes slowly adjusting. An old warehouse, judging by the high ceilings crisscrossed with rusted beams and broken skylights. Boston Harbor visible through shattered windows, the water dark and choppy under a gray sky. 3 men stood around her in a semicircle, all armed with guns that looked military-grade and far too professional. This wasn't random. This was planned. Organized. Deadly serious. What do you want? Her voice was steadier than she felt, than she had any right to be, with zip ties cutting into her wrists and guns pointed in her direction. The leader, mid-40s, expensive suit that contrasted sharply with the warehouse surroundings, cruel eyes that held no warmth, crouched in front of her. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, expensive and cloying. I want Don Moreau to remember what happens when you take what belongs to the Russo family. I want him to remember every choice he made that led to this moment. Every life he destroyed to build his pretty empire. Antonio Russo. The name clicked into place from her father's journal. A rival family that Enrico had systematically destroyed 20 years ago. Territory absorbed, businesses taken over, the Russo name erased from Boston's underworld like they'd never existed. 20 years ago, Antonio continued, standing and beginning to pace like a professor delivering a lecture, my father controlled the North End. Everything from the docks to the restaurants, from construction to waste management. We were kings. Then Enrico Moreau decided he wanted what was ours. Piece by piece he took it. Business by business he destroyed us. Left my father to rot in prison on charges Moreau manufactured while he built his empire on our bones. He stopped pacing, turning to look at her with eyes full of old hatred. My father died in that prison 3 months ago. Never saw freedom again. Never got to rebuild. Never got his revenge. But I will. For him. For all of us. Killing me won't bring your father back, Emilia said, trying to reason with the unreasonable. No. But it will destroy Enrico Moreau in a way that killing him never could. Antonio smiled, and it was the cruelest expression she'd ever seen. He'll remember all of us. Every name. Every face. Every life he ruined. And when we're done making him remember, when we're done making him suffer, we're going to make him forget. Starting with you. The one good thing in his miserable life. The one person he actually loves more than power. They kept her for 6 hours before they called him. 6 hours of fear and cold and the constant awareness of guns trained on her. 6 hours to think about all the warnings Enrico had given her, all the protection she'd rejected, all the safety she'd thrown away in the name of independence and breathing room. 6 hours to realize that running from him hadn't saved her. It had just meant she'd face the danger alone, without his protection, without his resources, without him. 6 hours to understand that love wasn't suffocating. It was necessary. And she'd walked away from the only man who could keep her safe from consequences she'd been naive enough to think didn't apply to her. When they finally made the call, Antonio put it on speaker so she could hear. So Enrico could hear her breathing, know she was alive, feel the knife twist. Moreau. Enrico's voice came through the speaker, flat and emotionless. But Emilia had learned to read the nuances beneath his control. The slight roughness that meant his throat was tight. The careful pronunciation that meant he was fighting for composure. He was terrified. "Hello, old friend. Long time no talk." Antonio's voice was cheerful, like he was calling to catch up over drinks. "I have something that belongs to you. Or used to belong to you. I'm a little unclear on the current status of your relationship." Silence on the other end. Then, carefully controlled, "Emilia has nothing to do with our war. Whatever grievance you have is with me. Let her go. But she has everything to do with it. Don't you see?" Antonio paced around Emilia's chair, his phone held casually. "She's the only thing you care about besides your precious empire. Maybe the only thing you care about more than your empire. So here's the deal, old friend. You have 24 hours to dismantle everything you built on my family's grave. Every restaurant, every business, every dollar you made from our territory. You give it all back publicly with an apology to the Russo name. Or she dies screaming your name, knowing you chose power over her life." The silence stretched so long that Emilia's heart started to break. Was he actually considering it? Would he choose his empire over her? Had she been wrong about everything? Then, put her on. Antonio held the phone to Emilia's ear, his hand tangled in her hair to hold her head still. "Enrico." Her voice cracked on his name. "Are you hurt?" His voice was gentle, the tone he used only with her. The tone that said she was precious, cherished, irreplaceable. "No. Not yet. You will be." Not a threat to her. A promise to her captors. A vow delivered with absolute certainty. "Antonio, you made a mistake. Whatever you think you're avenging, whatever debt you think I owe your family, it's not worth what I'm going to do to you and everyone you've ever loved." Big words for a man who's about to lose everything. "I've already lost what matters." Enrico's voice dropped to something deadly, something that made the men around her shift uncomfortably. "Which means I have nothing left to lose. And a man with nothing to lose, Antonio? That's the most dangerous thing in the world. That's the monster your father feared before I put him away. You just woke him up again." The call ended with a decisive click. Antonio stared at the phone, then laughed, but it sounded forced. "Tough talk. Let's see if he backs it up." But Emilia had heard something in Enrico's voice that Antonio had missed. Not fear. Not desperation. Certainty. He was coming. And God help anyone who stood in his way. 12 hours later, Emilia understood why people feared Don Enrico Moreau with a terror that went bone deep. The warehouse doors didn't open. They exploded inward with a deafening blast that shook the building's foundations. Not opened by force. Literally exploded, metal and wood fragmenting into deadly shrapnel. The concussion knocked 2 of her guards off their feet, sent the third scrambling for cover. Through the smoke and debris that filled the air like fog, a figure walked in with the calm of someone taking an evening stroll through a park. Not running. Not taking cover. Just walking with absolute confidence that nothing and no one would touch him. Here we go. Not alone. Behind him, men in tactical gear spread through the warehouse with military precision, moving like professionals who'd done this 100 times before. But Enrico himself was dressed in his usual impeccable suit, not a hair out of place, walking through the chaos like it didn't exist. Like bullets and explosions were just minor inconveniences in his day. He looked like death in Italian tailoring. Antonio grabbed Emilia, hauling her up from the floor and pressing a gun to her temple hard enough to hurt. "Stop right there. I'll kill her. I swear to God I'll blow her brains out." Enrico stopped, his eyes finding hers across the warehouse. In that gaze she saw everything. Fury that could burn cities. Fear that went soul deep. Love that would sacrifice anything, destroy anyone, burn the whole world down if it meant keeping her safe. Let her go, Antonio. His voice was calm. Reasonable. The most terrifying thing she'd ever heard because of how controlled it was. Give me what I want. No. Simple. Absolute. You know I won't. This was never about business or territory or your father's empire. This was about pride. About revenge. About making me feel what you felt when I destroyed your family. And I understand that. I do. But you made a fundamental miscalculation. Enrico took one step forward. Just one. But the power in that single movement made Antonio flinch. You thought taking her would make me weak. Desperate. Willing to negotiate. But you took the only thing that made me human, Antonio. The only thing that made me remember mercy was a concept that existed. And without her. His smile was cold enough to freeze blood. I'm just the monster your father told you about in bedtime stories to make you afraid of the dark. I'll kill her. The gun pressed harder against Emilia's temple, making her gasp. And I'll kill everyone you've ever loved before her body hits the ground. Enrico's voice was matter-of-fact, listing items from a grocery list with the same casual tone. Your sister Maria in Providence. Your nephew Vincent at Boston College. Your mother at that nice retirement home in Cambridge on Elm Street, room 304. Your cousin Frankie who runs that bar in Southie. Stop. Antonio's voice cracked. The gun trembled against Emilia's temple. Those are just the ones I'll kill personally. Enrico continued like Antonio hadn't spoken. Then my men will find the rest. Your extended family. Your associates. Everyone who shares your blood or your name. I'll burn your family tree to ash and salt the earth so nothing grows where they fell. I'll erase the Russo name so completely that in 100 years, no one will remember you ever existed. He took another step forward. Or you can let her go right now, take your men and leave Boston tonight. Never come back. Never speak my name again. Live out your life knowing you failed, but at least you live. Those are your options. Choose quickly. My patience is finite, and you're burning through the last of it with every second that gun stays against her head. The warehouse had gone absolutely silent. Even the tactical team had stopped moving, watching their boss negotiate with the calm of a man who held all the cards and knew it. Antonio's hand trembled. Emilia could feel his fear radiating through the arm locked around her throat. He was realizing what everyone in Boston already knew. Don Moreau didn't bluff. Never had. Every word he spoke was a promise he would keep. You're insane, Antonio whispered. No. I'm in love. Which is infinitely more dangerous. Enrico's eyes never left Emilia's. I've killed for less, Antonio. I've destroyed families for minor slights. For business. For principle. What do you think I'll do for her? What lines do you think I won't cross? What horrors do you think I'm not capable of when the alternative is losing the only good thing I've ever had? The gun dropped from Emilia's temple. Antonio shoved her forward violently and she stumbled on numb legs. Enrico was there before she fell, catching her like he'd been waiting for exactly this moment. His arms wrapped around her like she was the most precious thing in existence. One hand cradling her head against his chest while the other held her steady. She could feel his heart pounding, could feel the tremor in his hands that his voice never revealed. You came, she whispered against his shirt, breathing in his scent, cologne and gunpowder and something uniquely him. Did you think I wouldn't? His voice was rough with emotion barely contained. You could walk away 1,000 times, Tesoro, could tell me you never wanted to see me again, could marry someone else and have his children, and I would still come for you. Every single time. Until my last breath. Until they put me in the ground. You're mine, Emilia. That doesn't change just because you're tired of it. Behind them, Antonio and his men were being dragged away by Enrico's team. Efficiently. Professionally. Emilia didn't watch. Didn't want to know what would happen to them. Just held on to Enrico like he was the only solid thing in a tilting world. I'm sorry, she said against his chest, her voice breaking. You were right. About everything. The danger, the protection, all of it. I thought I could just walk away and be normal again, but... No. He pulled back to look at her, his hands gentle on her face despite the violence still echoing around them. You were right. I was suffocating you. Trying to control you because I was terrified of losing you. And in trying to protect you from everything, I pushed you away and left you vulnerable. His voice broke slightly, the first crack in his control she'd heard. This is my fault. If you'd had Carlo, if you'd had the security I wanted to give you, this never would have happened. You were taken because I let you go, because I tried to give you the freedom you needed, and it almost cost you everything. They would have come for me anyway. But you would have had protection. You would have been safe. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closing. I'm so sorry, Amelia. I tried to let you go, to give you the normal life you deserved, the life your father wanted for you. But I can't. I'm too selfish, too damaged, too far gone. I love you too much to let you go, even knowing I'll probably destroy you just by being near you. Then don't let me go. She kissed him, tasting salt, his tears or hers she couldn't tell. I don't want normal, Enrico. I don't want safe. I don't want some easy life with a literature professor who reads poetry and doesn't have blood on his hands. I want you, all of you. The protection and the danger and the suffocating intensity and the jealousy and the empire and the ghosts. I want the man who carries 41 names on his skin and my father's paintings in his soul. You don't know what you're asking. I do. She pulled back to meet his eyes. I'm asking you to let me choose you with full knowledge of what that means. I'm asking you to stop protecting me from yourself and trust that I'm strong enough to stand beside you. I'm asking you to remember that my father didn't choose exile because he was weak. He chose it because love is worth any price, any sacrifice, any cost. And I'm my father's daughter, Enrico. I choose you. I choose this. I choose us. Around them, his men were cleaning up, securing the warehouse, removing bodies. The violence of his world happening in the periphery while they stood in the eye of the storm. I'll never be safe, he said quietly. I'll never be normal. There will always be another Antonio, another threat, another person who wants to use you to hurt me. Then we deal with them together. She kissed him again, softer this time. With Carlo and security and all the protection you want to give me. I was wrong to push it away. Wrong to think independence meant refusing help. Wrong to believe I could just walk away from this world and pretend it didn't exist. I killed them, he said, needing her to know. Antonio and his men. After we got you out, I went back. I couldn't risk them trying again, couldn't risk them telling others that taking you was an option. So I made sure they couldn't. Made sure everyone understood what happens when someone touches what's mine. I know. She didn't flinch from the truth. And I'm not going to pretend it doesn't frighten me. But it frightens me less than the alternative. Less than losing you. Less than living without you. His arms tightened around her. I don't deserve you. Probably not. She smiled through her tears. But you're stuck with me anyway. For better or worse. Through danger and protection and all the complicated, messy, beautiful chaos that comes with loving someone like you. I love you, he whispered. More than power. More than empire. More than the life I built. You're the only thing that matters now. The only thing that ever really mattered. I love you too. I'm sorry it took almost losing you to realize it. Later, after statements to police that Enrico's lawyers handled, after she'd been checked by a doctor and declared physically unharmed, they ended up at his penthouse. The one place in all of Boston where he could let his guard down. He checked her for injuries 3 more times despite the doctor's clearance. Examined every bruise from the zip ties. Every mark from being manhandled, with a clinical thoroughness that barely concealed his rage at what had been done to her. I'm okay, she kept saying. Enrico, I'm fine. You're not fine. His hands were gentle as they traced the bruises on her wrists. You were taken. Threatened. Could have been killed because of me. Because loving me made you a target. How is any of that fine? Because I'm here. Because you came for me. Because we're together. She caught his hands, stilling their restless movement. I need you to stop punishing yourself for things that haven't happened. I'm alive. I'm safe. I'm exactly where I want to be. He pulled her into his lap, holding her like he needed the physical contact to believe she was real. When I got that call, when I heard Antonio's voice and realized what had happened, something broke inside me. Every protection I'd put in place, every contingency I'd planned for, none of it mattered because you weren't with me. Because I'd let you go. The worst hours of my life were knowing you were in danger and I couldn't get to you fast enough. But you did get to me. Barely. If he'd decided to kill you instead of using you as leverage. His voice broke. I can't lose you, Amelia. I won't survive it. You're not just someone I love. You're the only reason I'm still trying to be human instead of just a monster wearing a man's face. They sat in silence for a long moment, holding each other. Then Emilia said softly, "Tell me about the names. The 41 on your skin. I want to know them. I want to help you remember them the right way." And so he did. One by one he told her the stories. The names of men he'd killed in wars she'd never seen. The names of innocent people caught in crossfire. The names of people who'd betrayed him and paid the price. The names of those who'd simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. He told her about Marco, about the choice he'd given her father and the weight of forcing someone to choose between life and everything that made life worth living. He told her everything. The good and the bad and the irredeemable. And she listened without judgment, without flinching, without looking away from the monster he'd been and in some ways still was. When he finished, dawn was breaking over Boston. They were still curled together on the couch, exhausted emotionally if not physically. "Thank you," she said softly, "for trusting me with them. For letting me help you carry the weight. Will you stay?" The vulnerability in his voice broke her heart. "Not just tonight. Not just until the fear fades. But permanently. Will you choose this life, this world, this man who will probably never be anything but complicated and dangerous and too intense?" "Yes." No hesitation. On one condition. "Anything. You stop trying to protect me from yourself. You stop pushing me away when things get hard because you think I'd be better off without you. You let me in completely, the darkness and the light, the empire and the ghosts, all of it. No more half measures. No more holding back." He kissed her, deep and slow and full of promise. "I can do that. I can give you everything, even the parts one wish I could hide. Then I'm yours. Completely. For as long as you want me. Forever then." He smiled against her lips. "Because I'm never letting you go again." This time when they made love it was different. Not the desperate passion of their first time or the careful reverence of their early relationship. This was certainty. The absolute knowledge that they belonged to each other, that they'd chosen each other despite everything that made it complicated and dangerous and probably unwise. Enrico worshipped her like someone who'd been given a second chance at salvation they didn't deserve. Every touch deliberate and meaningful. Every kiss a promise. Every whispered word of love a vow more binding than any legal contract. And when they finally came together it felt like home. Like finding the missing piece that made everything else make sense. Like two broken people creating something whole from their jagged edges. Afterward, lying in his arms while he traced lazy patterns on her skin, Emilia felt complete for the first time in her life. "Marry me," Enrico said into the darkness. She froze. "What?" "Marry me. Tomorrow. Next week. Whenever you want. But marry me, Emilia. Make this permanent. Make it real. Give me the legal right to protect you that I've been taking liberties with anyway." He shifted, rising up on one elbow to look down at her. "Give me the right to call you my wife. To build a life with you that isn't just stolen moments and complicated logistics. To show the world that you chose me and I chose you and nothing else matters. That's possibly the least romantic proposal in history. Then let me try again." He slid out of bed, and she watched in amazement as this powerful, dangerous man knelt naked beside the bed like a supplicant before a queen. "Emilia Conti, you walked into my restaurant and reminded me what it felt like to be human. You made me want to be better, even knowing I'll probably never fully succeed. You look at me and see the monster and the man and you choose both. You honor my ghosts and my guilt and somehow make them bearable. I love you more than I thought I was capable of loving anything. Marry me. Let me spend the rest of my life trying to deserve you. Let me give you my name and my protection and every piece of myself I have left to give." Tears streamed down her face. "Yes. 1,000 times yes. I'll marry you." His smile was pure joy, transforming his face into something beautiful and young and full of hope. "I don't deserve you. You keep saying that. Maybe someday you'll believe me when I say you do." She pulled him back into bed, into her arms. "We deserve each other. Broken pieces and all." They fell asleep tangled together, planning a future that seemed impossible but felt inevitable. They married 2 weeks later in a small, intimate ceremony at the same church where her father was buried. Emilia had insisted on it, wanted Marco's presence there somehow, wanted to make the vows in a place that connected past and future. Only a handful of people attended. Sarah from the museum, standing as Emilia's maid of honor with tears streaming down her face. Carlo, who served as Enrico's best man with the same quiet dignity he brought to everything. The grandmother from Enrico's favorite restaurant, who cried and called them both her grandchildren. Father Michael, who'd known Enrico since he was a boy running wild in the North End, who'd seen him become a monster and now got to witness him become something else. Emilia wore a simple white dress, vintage lace she'd found in a small boutique. Nothing elaborate or expensive. Just beautiful in its simplicity. Enrico wore his best suit, charcoal gray, Italian tailoring, a white rose in his lapel. When Emilia walked down the aisle alone, because her father couldn't be there and she wouldn't let anyone else take his place, Enrico cried. Actual tears streaming down his face without shame or attempt to hide them. Cried like a man who'd never expected to have something this good, this pure, this undeserved. Father Michael smiled at them both, these two complicated souls finding each other across impossible odds. Dearly beloved, he began. But before he could continue, Enrico spoke, his voice carrying through the small church. I object. The gathered guests gasped. Emilia's eyes widened. Father Michael paused mid-sentence. I object, Enrico said again, his voice stronger now, to a woman this good, this pure, this extraordinary binding herself to a man like me. A man with blood on his hands and ghosts in his soul. A man who's done things that should bar him from ever touching something this sacred. But I'm too selfish to let her go. Too broken to survive without her. Too in love to do the right thing and walk away. So I'm going to spend every day of the rest of my life trying to be worth the gift she's giving me. Trying to deserve the love she offers despite knowing what I am. Emilia squeezed his hand, tears streaming down her own face now. Your objection is noted and overruled by the bride. The small congregation laughed, breaking the tension. Even Father Michael smiled. Then let's proceed, the priest said warmly. They exchanged vows, traditional words made sacred by the weight they carried. When Enrico slipped the ring on her finger, his hands shook slightly. The first time she'd ever seen him less than perfectly controlled. I love you, he whispered just for her. More than power. More than empire. More than the life I built on ash and regret. You're the only thing that matters now. The only thing that ever really mattered. I love you too, she whispered back. All of you. Even the parts you think are unlovable. Especially those parts. When they kissed, it felt like a promise. A vow more binding than the ones they'd spoken aloud. A commitment that would outlast danger and threat and all the complications their life together would bring. As they walked back down the aisle as husband and wife, Emilia glanced at the stained glass window depicting Saint Sebastian, patron saint of soldiers. Arrows piercing his body but his face serene. Pain and peace existing simultaneously. He understood that now. Understood that love could hurt and heal at the same time. That choosing someone meant accepting all of them, darkness and light together. Enrico followed her gaze, then leaned down to whisper in her ear. Your father would be proud of you. Of us. Of the life we're building from the ashes of what was. I know, she whispered back. I can feel him here. Giving us his blessing. Outside the church, the October sun broke through clouds, turning the cemetery golden. They paused at Marco's grave before leaving, hand in hand. We did it, Papa, Emilia said softly. I married the monster you saved. And he's going to spend the rest of his life trying to be the man you believed he could be. Enrico laid a white rose on the grave. I'll keep my promise, Marco. Remember. All of them. And I'll make sure our children know what you sacrificed. What you chose. Why memory matters more than anything. Then they left, walking toward their future. Toward the life they'd build together from broken pieces and impossible choices. The first month of marriage was an adjustment period. Learning to live together, to navigate each other's spaces and routines and boundaries. Enrico was used to living alone, controlling every aspect of his environment with military precision. Emilia was used to independence, making her own decisions without consulting anyone, coming and going as she pleased. They fought occasionally, small arguments that flared hot and resolved quickly. His overprotectiveness clashing with her need for autonomy. Her refusal to check in constantly bumping against his need to know she was safe. The normal friction of two strong-willed people learning to share a life. But they learned to compromise. Carlos still drove her to work each morning, but she could take the subway home if she wanted, as long as she texted when she arrived safely. Enrico still tracked her location through her phone, but he asked permission first and explained it made him feel secure rather than demanding compliance. She still saw Thomas for work projects, but she told Enrico beforehand and invited him to join them occasionally so he could see there was nothing to be jealous of. "You're getting better at this," Emilia observed one evening after Enrico had managed an entire dinner with Thomas without once looking like he wanted to break the man's fingers. "I'm trying." He poured her more wine. "It's not easy knowing another man spends hours with you discussing art and beauty and things that matter. But I'm learning to trust that you chose me. That you come home to me every night. That what we have is stronger than my insecurity. It is stronger." She kissed him softly. "You don't have to be perfect, Enrico. You just have to keep trying. That's all I ask." It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. A life built on honesty and compromise and the daily choice to love each other despite the complications. 3 months after the wedding, Emilia started feeling nauseous in the mornings. At first, she blamed stress from a difficult restoration project. Then she blamed the new coffee Carlo had started buying. Then she blamed the shellfish they'd had at dinner the previous week. Sarah figured it out first, watching Emilia rush to the bathroom for the 3rd time in a week. "You're pregnant," she said matter-of-factly when Emilia returned, pale and shaky. "I'm not." Emilia stopped. Thought about the timeline. The missed period she'd been too busy to notice. The exhaustion that no amount of sleep seemed to cure. The food aversions that had started last week. "Oh God. Oh God indeed." Sarah grinned. "Does the silver fox know he's going to be a father?" "I don't even know if I'm pregnant yet." "Then you better find out. Because I've been pregnant 3 times and honey, you have all the signs." Emilia bought 4 pregnancy tests on the way home, her hands shaking as she paid. In the penthouse bathroom she took all 4, needing the confirmation of multiple tests to believe what she suspected. All positive. Every single one. She stared at the collection of tests on the bathroom counter, trying to process the reality. Baby. She was going to have a baby with Enrico. They were going to be parents. Terror and joy warred in her chest in equal measure. Telling Enrico was terrifying. Not because she thought he'd react badly, but because this changed everything. A child meant vulnerability multiplied. A new target for anyone who wanted to hurt him. A tiny person who would inherit the complicated legacy they'd built together. She found him in his study, reviewing paperwork for one of the restaurants. He looked up when she entered, and his expression immediately shifted to concern. "What's wrong? You're pale. Are you sick? Did something happen at work?" "I'm pregnant." The words fell into the space between them like stones into still water. Enrico went absolutely still, his face unreadable as he processed what she'd said. The silence stretched. Seconds becoming minutes, becoming an eternity. Then he was moving, crossing the room in 3 long strides and pulling her into his arms. Holding her like she was made of the most fragile glass. His whole body was shaking. "Say it again," he whispered against her hair, his voice rough with emotion. "I'm pregnant. About 8 weeks, I think. I took 4 tests. They were all positive." His arms tightened around her and she realized he was crying, silent tears that soaked into her hair. His shoulders shook with the force of emotions he couldn't contain. "Enrico." She pulled back to look at him, alarmed. "Are you?" "I'm 58 years old, tesoro." His voice broke on the words. "I never thought. I spent so many years building an empire of death and regret. I thought I'd die alone, surrounded by ghosts and the weight of all the lives I destroyed. I never thought I'd have this. A wife who loves me despite everything. A child. A family. A reason to be something more than just the monster everyone fears. Are you happy?" The question came out smaller than she intended. He laughed through his tears, pulling her close again. "Happy doesn't begin to cover it. Terrified, yes. Overwhelmed, absolutely. But happy. Emilia, you've given me everything I never knew I wanted. Everything I was too afraid to dream about. A family. A legacy that isn't written in blood. The chance to be a father and try to do it right. To give a child what I never had, safety and love, and a father who chooses them above everything else." She kissed him, tasting salt and love and hope. "We're going to be parents. We're going to be parents," he repeated, wonder in his voice. Then his expression shifted to something more serious. "Proactive. I need to make some changes. Shore up security. Eliminate threats before they become problems. Make sure our child never has to pay for my sins. Our child will know who their father is. All of who you are. The good and the complicated and the parts you're still trying to make peace with. She placed his hand on her still flat stomach. And they'll know they were wanted. Worth every sacrifice. Like your father loved you. Exactly like that. She smiled through her own tears. We're going to give this baby what we both had. Parents who would do anything to protect them. Who would sacrifice anything to give them a better life. Enrico knelt slowly, pressing his forehead against her stomach. I swear to you, he whispered to the tiny life growing inside her, I will be better. I will be worthy of you. I will build a world where you're safe and loved and never have to be afraid. Where you can grow up knowing your father is trying every day to be the man you deserve. Emilia ran her fingers through his silver hair, her heart so full it hurt. They're going to love you. How could they not? You're going to be an amazing father. I'm going to try. He stood, pulling her close again. I'm going to try so hard, Tesoro. To be the father I never had. To give them what I never got. To break the cycle and build something new. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Enrico's protectiveness reached new, almost comical heights. He wanted her to stop working entirely. She refused, compromising by reducing her hours and working from home when possible. He wanted Carlo with her every single moment. She agreed to constant security but insisted they remain discreet. He genuinely suggested she move into a panic room for the entire 9 months. She laughed until she realized he was serious, then had to spend an hour convincing him that was insane. I'm serious, Emilia. Do you know how vulnerable you are right now? How many people might see you as an opportunity? I'm pregnant, not made of porcelain. She kissed his worried face, trying not to smile at his overprotective intensity. Our baby is going to be fine. I'm going to be fine. You need to trust that. I trust you. I don't trust the world. His hand rested protectively on her growing belly. Every time you leave this apartment, every moment you're out of my sight, I imagine 1,000 different disasters. Then trust that I'm your wife. That I knew what I was signing up for. That I'm strong enough to handle this. She covered his hand with hers. And trust that this baby is strong too. They're half you after all. They've got your stubbornness and my father's resilience. It became their mantra through the pregnancy. Trust. Not in the world or fate or safety but in each other. In the life they were building. In the family they were creating from 2 broken people who'd found each other across impossible odds. At 6 months pregnant, Emilia insisted on visiting her father's grave. She went alone at first, wanting the private moment, but Enrico followed at a distance. When she gestured for him to join her, he came and stood behind her, his hand resting on her shoulder. Hi, Papa, she said softly, one hand on her rounded belly. I have some news. You're going to be a grandfather. Can you believe it? Me having a baby with Enrico Moro. The man you made promise to remember. The man who spent every day since trying to honor that promise. Her voice broke slightly. I wish you were here to meet them. To see that I'm happy. To know that Enrico kept his word, he remembers. Not just you but everyone. He carries them with him every day. The weight you asked him to bear, he bears it. And now we're going to teach our child why that matters. Why memory is sacred. Why the people we've lost deserve to be honored. She felt Enrico's hand tighten on her shoulder, felt his other hand come to rest beside hers on her belly. I'll make sure they know about you, Enrico said to the headstone, his voice thick with emotion. Your talent. Your sacrifice. Your love for your daughter that was strong enough to give up everything for her safety. They'll grow up surrounded by your paintings, hearing stories about the artist who saw beauty in broken things. Who documented truth when everyone wanted him to forget. Who chose love over everything else. He paused, then added quietly, Thank you, Marco. For trusting me with her. For making me promise to remember so that I became someone capable of loving her the way she deserves. You saved me without knowing it. Gave me a purpose beyond power and an empire. I promise you your grandchild will know what you sacrificed. Will understand why you made the choices you did. Your legacy won't be forgotten. Emilia reached up to cover his hand with hers. We should go. I have a craving for that terrible Chinese food you hate. I don't hate it. I just have standards. His tone was lighter now, grateful for the shift to normalcy. You're a food snob. I'm Italian. It's genetic. He helped her stand, careful with her changed center of gravity. Our child is going to grow up with proper taste in food, not your bizarre American cravings. Our child is going to be half American, which means they'll inherit my love of terrible takeout and your horrified reactions to it. The easy banter carried them back to the car, to their life, to the future they were building together. Behind them, Marco's grave stood quiet in the afternoon sun, witness to promises kept and love that transcended death. Their daughter was born on a snowy February evening during one of Boston's worst winter storms in years. Labor was long and difficult, 18 hours of pain that had Emilia questioning every decision that had led to this moment. Enrico was absolutely useless. He paced the hospital room like a caged animal, snapped at nurses who were just trying to do their jobs, demanded better pain medication for Emilia until she told him in no uncertain terms to sit down and shut up before she kicked him out entirely. "I'm just trying to help," he protested. "You're making it worse," she gasped through another contraction. "Just hold my hand. Be here. That's all I need." So he did. Held her hand and let her squeeze until his fingers went white. Whispered words of love and encouragement in Italian when the pain got too bad for English. Wiped her forehead with cool cloths and told her she was the strongest person he'd ever known. When the baby finally arrived after what felt like an eternity, when the doctor placed that tiny, screaming bundle on Emilia's chest, everything else fell away. The pain, the exhaustion, the fear, all of it disappeared in the face of this perfect little person they'd created. "She's perfect," Emilia breathed, tears streaming down her face as she stared at her daughter. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a shock of dark hair and lungs that worked perfectly judging by the volume of her cries. Enrico stood frozen beside the bed, staring at his daughter like she was a miracle he didn't dare touch. Like she might disappear if he looked away or blinked. "Do you want to hold her?" Emilia asked, her voice gentle. "I don't know how." He looked terrified, this man who faced down rivals and threats without flinching. "What if I drop her? What if I hurt her?" "You won't. Come here." She guided his arms into position, showing him how to support the baby's head the way the nurse had shown her. "There. You're a natural." When his daughter was settled against his chest, she stopped crying. Just looked up at him with dark eyes that were already so much like his own. Eyes that would see everything, know everything, judge him for everything he'd been and everything he was trying to become. "Hello, Piccola," he whispered, his voice breaking on the word. "I'm your papa. And I'm going to spend every day of my life making sure you never doubt how wanted you are. How loved. How precious. You're the best thing I've ever had a hand in creating. The only purely good thing in a life full of compromises and darkness." The baby yawned, already bored with his promises, her tiny fist curling against his shirt. Emilia laughed, exhausted and euphoric and so in love with both of them she thought her heart might burst. What should we name her? They debated names for months without deciding. Traditional Italian names, family names, names that meant something significant. But now, looking at his daughter, Enrico knew with absolute certainty. "Sofia Marco Moro," he said. "Sofia for wisdom and hope. Marco for the man who saved us both by making me promise to remember. By forcing me to carry the weight that made me human again." "It's perfect," Emilia whispered. "Sofia Marco Moro. Our little miracle." "Our everything," Enrico corrected, unable to take his eyes off his daughter. "The reason for all of it. The future we're building from the ashes of what was." The first year was beautiful chaos. Sleepless nights and endless diapers and the constant fear that they were doing everything wrong. But it was also joy distilled to its purest form. Sofia's first smile at 6 weeks, directed at Enrico while he sang her Italian lullabies at 3 in the morning. Her first laugh at 4 months, belly laughs that seemed too big for such a tiny person. The way she'd reach for Enrico the moment she heard his voice, like he was her favorite person in the entire world. "She has you wrapped around her finger," Emilia said one evening, watching Enrico rock Sofia to sleep while humming softly. Completely and utterly. He didn't even try to deny it, didn't try to pretend he wasn't already devastated by love for this tiny human. "I would burn the world down for this child. Destroy empires. Start wars. Whatever it took to keep her safe and happy. I know. Just try to leave some of the world intact for her to inherit." He smiled, still watching Sofia's face with wonder. "I'm making changes. Real changes this time, not just surface alterations. Selling off the shadier businesses. Investing heavily in legitimate ventures. Restaurants, real estate, art galleries. I want Sophia to inherit something she can be proud of. A legacy that isn't built on blood and fear. She'll be proud of you regardless of what you leave her. I want to deserve that pride. He looked down at his sleeping daughter, his expression soft in a way few people ever got to see. I want to be the man she thinks I am when she looks at me like I hung the moon and stars just for her. I want her to grow up and still love me when she learns what I did. I want to give her enough good to balance the bad. You're already that man, Enrico. You became him the moment you decided to be better for her. For us. Emilia crossed to them, wrapping her arms around her husband and daughter. Our family. Built from broken pieces and impossible choices and love strong enough to transform everything. On Sophia's first birthday, Enrico made an announcement that shocked everyone in his organization who'd known him for decades. He was retiring from the darker aspects of his empire. Not from the businesses, those he'd continued to manage and grow. But from the shadows, from the violence, from the part of his world that required blood and fear to maintain. He was stepping back, letting younger men take over territories he'd held for decades with an iron fist. Becoming as much as possible legitimate. The announcement came at a private meeting with his most trusted associates. Carlo was there, of course, as were the men who'd helped run his empire for years. They listened in stunned silence as Don Enrico Moreau, the king of Boston's underworld for over 30 years, told them he was walking away. "Are you sure about this?" Carlo asked quietly after the others had left. "You've spent your whole life building this power. Can you really just let it go?" "I'm not letting it go. I'm choosing what matters more." Enrico looked at the photo on his desk, Emilia and Sophia both laughing at something off camera. "I spent 57 years building an empire of ghosts and regrets. Built it on the backs of people I erased, on choices that gave me nightmares, on a foundation of blood that never quite washed clean. But in the last 3 years, Emilia and Sophia gave me something worth more than all of it combined." He stood, walking to the window that overlooked the city he'd controlled for so long. A family. A legacy that isn't written in blood. The chance to be remembered for something other than the names on my skin. I want my daughter to grow up proud of her father, not afraid of him. I want her to inherit businesses she can run openly, not shadows she has to hide. I want to be the man my wife believes I can be. "Your father-in-law would be proud," Carlo said softly. "I hope so." Enrico's voice was rough with emotion. "Because I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to deserve the gift Marco gave me when he made me promise to remember. He saved me, Carlo. Not by forgiving me but by forcing me to carry the weight of every choice I made. To never forget the cost. To understand that power without memory is just cruelty. And now I get to teach Sophia the same lesson. That memory matters. That the people we've lost deserve to be honored. That love is worth any sacrifice." That night when he told Emilia about his decision, she cried. "Are you sure?" she asked, holding Sophia while the baby played with her necklace. "This is everything you built. I don't want you to resent me or Sophia for asking you to give it up. You didn't ask. I chose." He pulled them both close, his arms around his family. "And I'll never resent the two of you for giving me something worth choosing. For the first time in my life, I'm not just surviving or accumulating power. I'm living. Building something real and good and pure. That's worth more than any empire." 5 years later, on a sunny October afternoon, Emilia stood in her father's old studio, now converted into her own workspace filled with paintings in various states of restoration. Sophia played at her feet, creating her own masterpiece with finger paints and the kind of fearless creativity only children possessed. The studio walls were covered with Marco's paintings that Enrico had collected over the years, each one a memory preserved in oils and canvas. Between them hung photos. Their wedding day, Sophia's birth, family moments captured in time. A wall of memories, honoring the past while celebrating the present. "Mama, look." Sophia held up a canvas covered in handprints and swirls of color that somehow managed to be both chaotic and beautiful. "It's beautiful, Tesoro." Emilia crouched beside her daughter, admiring the work with genuine appreciation. "You're quite the artist. Just like your grandfather. Can we hang it in Papa's restaurant?" Sophia's dark eyes were so like Enrico's, full of intelligence and mischief. "I think he'd love that. He hangs all your artwork." "Because I'm his favorite." Sophia said it matter-of-factly, secure in her father's love in a way Emilia had never been as a child. You absolutely are. The door opened and Enrico entered, still in his suit from a board meeting but looking younger than he had in years. The weight he'd carried for decades had lightened. Not disappeared, he still bore the marks of his past, still remembered every name on his skin, but it no longer crushed him. My two favorite artists, he said, his face lighting up the moment he saw his girls. What masterpieces are we creating today? Sophia launched herself at him and he caught her easily, swinging her up into his arms. We're making memories. Because Papa says memories are important. Over their daughter's head Enrico's eyes met Emilia's. So much said in that look without words. Gratitude for the second chance he never thought he'd get. Love that had transformed him from monster to man. The quiet joy of someone who'd found redemption in the most unexpected place. Memories are very important, Emilia agreed, standing and crossing to her family. They remind us where we came from and why we're here. And who we love, Enrico added, kissing Sophia's dark curls before setting her down gently. Speaking of which, I have something for you both. He pulled out two small boxes. The first he gave to Sophia, a locket containing a tiny reproduction of one of Marco's paintings. This is from your grandfather, he explained. So you can carry a piece of him with you always. Sophia's eyes went wide. The grandfather who painted all the pretty pictures? That's the one. He would have loved you very much. The second box he handed to Emilia. Inside was a key on a delicate chain. What's this? A key to the new gallery. His smile was proud and a little nervous. I bought the building where your father used to have his studio. I'm turning it into a permanent gallery for his work. All the pieces I've collected over the years, plus space for new artists. Sophia's work will hang there too when she's ready. A living memorial to the man who changed everything by asking me to remember. Emilia threw her arms around him, tears streaming down her face. It's perfect. He would be so proud. I hope so. He held her close while Sophia tugged at their legs, wanting to be included in the hug. They lifted her up between them, a family sandwich of love and paint-stained hands. Because I'm trying every day to be worthy of what he gave me. What you both give me. That night, after Sophia was asleep and they sat on their balcony overlooking the city, Emilia asked the question she'd been wondering about for months. Do you ever regret it? Giving up the power? The empire? The control? Never. Not even once. He didn't hesitate, pulling her closer against the October chill. I traded an empire of ghosts for a kingdom of 3. You, Sophia, and eventually the other children will have. That's not a trade. That's a miracle I did nothing to deserve but will spend every day trying to earn. Other children? She raised an eyebrow. Sophia needs siblings. Brothers and sisters to grow up with, to remember together, to carry on the legacy we're building. His smile was pure mischief, the boyish grin that made him look decades younger. Besides, I've discovered I'm quite good at being a father. And I'd like more practice. You're already an amazing father. Then let me be an amazing father to a few more. He kissed her softly. Let's fill this life with love and laughter and children who know they're wanted. Who grow up surrounded by art and memory and the knowledge that love is worth any sacrifice. Emilia smiled against his lips. How many children are we talking about? However many you want. However many we're blessed with. He rested his hand on her stomach. I want our home full of life and noise and chaos. I want Sophia to have what neither of us had. A big family that loves unconditionally. I want to build something so full of light that it drowns out all the darkness I carried for so long. Then let's build it together. She kissed him again, deeper this time. One memory, one day, one child at a time. They sat in comfortable silence after that, watching the city lights twinkle like stars, surrounded by the life they'd built from impossible choices and transformative love. 41 names still marked Enrico's skin. But now they shared space with new memories. A wife who'd chosen him despite everything, a daughter who looked at him like he was a hero, a life redeemed not through forgetting but through remembering. The past couldn't be erased. The ghosts couldn't be banished. The weight couldn't be set down. But it could be transformed. But carried with purpose rather than shame. And in the end that was the greatest revenge of all. Not destroying the man who'd altered so many lives, but loving him into becoming someone new. Someone better. Someone worthy of being remembered not just for his sins, but for his salvation. Amelia had walked into his restaurant looking for ghosts, demanding that he remember the people he'd erased. She'd found love instead. Found a man drowning in guilt who needed someone to help him carry the weight. Found a partner who would transform for her, with her, because of her. And together they'd built something neither ghosts nor regrets could touch. A family. A legacy. A future written not in blood, but in hope and memory and love that conquered everything. Every day Don Enrico Moreau remembered. Not just the names on his skin, but the woman who'd saved him by refusing to let him forget. The daughter who gave him reason to be better. The family that transformed his empire of ash into a kingdom of light. That was Amelia's revenge, making him remember until remembering became redemption. And his salvation, learning that love could transform even the darkest past into the brightest future. Their story wasn't about forgetting or forgiving. It was about remembering together. And building something beautiful from the broken pieces of what was. The end. Thank you for experiencing this journey of memory, love, and transformation. If this story moved you, please like, share, subscribe, and let us know where you're watching from in the comments. Stories like these live on through the people who share them, and your support helps us create more emotional, powerful romances that stay with you long after the final word.